Welcome to Rick Rack Ruby. I'm Laura Cluvo. Today we will be making this stocking Christmas ornament from the Pixie Noel 2 fabric collection. This is the third design in my baby's first Christmas collection. It's fun and easy, so let's get started. To make our Pixie Noel 2 baby's first Christmas stocking ornament, we'll start with the pattern. This pattern is 2 3/4 inches across and about 5.5 inches tall. Just made a gentle curve for the heel and a gentle curve here. I'm trying to keep it small. I started off even smaller, but didn't work. So from this pattern, I cut one from Pellon 40 weight non-fusible interfacing. It's just sort of like a stabilizer, and 2 linings. These are mirrored, and 1 backing. And for the back, the toe goes in the opposite direction from the front. I prefer for the stocking to face this way, so the toe is to the right when I'm looking at it, and so the back goes to the left. When we started the collection, I knew that I wanted to make I wanted to use this little piece, this little swag design with the birds. And so I cut this 2 3/4 inches across, and let me see, I can't quite remember. Was it 1 3/4 tall? 1 3/4 tall. And I just sort of centered the birds. I started off smaller and the birds were too close to the edges, so I had to make it a little bit wider. So I'm just going to pin that, and then for my cuff, I'm going to use this pink, the pink floral. I have mostly scraps at this point, but I'm just going to look for a straight edge, and I'm going to seam that right there, flip it, and press it. Next, I'm going to add this stripe along the bottom edge of that swag print. I like my stripe to run diagonally like this. So from left to right with the left higher. Just a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then I will fold it down and press. So I sewed that straight across, and now we're going to start adding the angles. The way that I like to make the angles is starting on this inner corner here. Just sort of draw a line starting about 1/4 inch down. And then over here, from here to here, it's going to be 1.5 inches. So 1/4 inch on this side, and then out here, 1.5 inches. Now, you know, it's a curved edge and it's a little tricky to figure out what's 1.5 inches, but I think you get the idea. Now I'm going to trim on this line. Great. And then for my next piece, I'm going to introduce a blue. I like the blue polka dot. Here it is. I just have a lot of scraps here. So I'm going to add this one next. I'm going to just line that up along that edge, 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then press. Because I only made this 1/4 inch here, and I'm using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, this is going to come to a nice sharp point. I'm using a different ruler that maybe you can see the lines better. There's the 1/4 inch, and then 1.5 is right there. I'm going to cut right at that line. Always move the stabilizer out of the way. Of course, you don't want to cut through your stabilizer. And then I'm going to trim this excess off. And guess what? I'm going to throw it away. What a concept. Okay, now this next strip is pink, and I've been using the mushrooms, but sometimes the mushrooms are so wide apart that I can make this piece and not even get any mushrooms in it. So I'm going to be a little bit more careful that or the mushrooms are upside down. So I think I just might use a different pink. So I will use this pink with the white poinsettia for the next patch here. Now as we get closer and closer down to the last patch, this is going to be a little bit different shape. And I just need to see the edges of the design, so I'm going to trim this a little bit beyond the foundation. Okay, so instead of making another wedge like this and then having the toe just be this little bit, I'm going to actually do the opposite. So this is going to be the little 1/4 inch, and this will be the 1.5 inches over here. And you can see how these come to nice points here. And so I want to make sure this does the same on this side. So it's a 1/4 inch here, and then 1.5 inches over here. So that's 1 inch, 1.5 inches. I'm measuring from the top of the line of this seam here, like that. And I can see that that'll be enough room here on the toe for the last final print. That looks good. And then finally the blue with these flowers, that's going to be the very last patch. To find a straight part. That looks pretty straight. I like that. Okay. This looks a little boring right here just because there's not a lot of color in these patches, but I'm going to do some red embroidery between, and I think that'll perk it up a little bit. Okay, so this will be my last one. There's my last patch. And I'm going to trim this here. And then I'm going to flip it over to the back, and I'm just going to do a very, very small stitch around the entire perimeter of the design. Just a little more than 1/8 inch. I'm going to go around the whole thing. I've completed the patchwork on the front, and now I'm going to do some decorative stitches. To keep it simple, I'm just going to use 3 different stitches. I'm going to do the triple zigzag in a couple of spots, and then a little blanket stitch in a couple of spots, and a feather stitch. I have my machine threaded with red, and I am ready to go. Now I'm going to thread my machine with white again and construct the stocking. I have cut 2 linings from this. It's white with pink little snow globes, and I've used this one for the backing. First, I'm going to sew this to the top, 1 lining piece to the top edge here, and then right sides together, 1 lining to the back, like this, straight across the top edges. Now I will open these up and match the linings and the front to the back. I like to start right here, folding the seam allowance down toward the main part, the front and the back of the stocking, and not toward the linings. And just pin those seam allowances, matching up the seam in the center. Same thing over here. Match up the seam, fold the seam allowance down toward the main part of the stocking. And then I'm going to pin all the way around, leaving an opening in the bottom straight edge of the lining. And I'll pin all the way around. Here we go. Now I will stitch around, probably starting here and going all the way around, back stitch, here and here, and leave this open for turning. Now I will clip into the inner curves here on the front, back, and on the lining. And then I'm just going to trim out that seam allowance a little bit. Makes it a little bit smoother, but don't cut it too close. Now I'm going to turn this through the opening here in the bottom of the lining. I'm just going to turn this to the right side. It's not hard. I'm using a chopstick to be sure that I'm getting the seam all the way to the outside, just so that I can make sure that this is a nice, smooth, rounded shape. Okay, so now before I turn the lining to the inside, I'm going to close up this little opening in the bottom of the foot. Right here, I'm just going to do it by top stitching. No one will ever see this. I don't need to, you know, slip stitch it by hand or anything. So I'm just going to do a top stitch across that opening there. I closed that up, and now I'm going to just tuck it inside. I'm going to put the lining all the way down into the toe here. That looks good. For my hanging loop, I'm using a red and white baker's twine, a nice big needle to accommodate the twine, and pull it through. I just stitched through the back right there, just through the lining. Then I'll tie an overhand knot. I tend to make my hanging loops kind of generous. And then I'm going to twine to tie a bow right here. Onto the hanging loop. Right there. I will trim my streamers a little bit. I don't want them longer than the stocking. They don't have to be the same, and I really don't like the loops to be the same length. But I'm going to tie an overhand knot about 1/2 inch above the end, and I'm going to leave those to fray because they will fray. It looks cute. And then right here, I sort of open up the bow and squeeze a little hot glue right there, and then kind of press this into the hot glue to secure it so it won't come untied. I feel like I make a stocking for every single fabric collection. And you would think that I would be getting better at this, but this one took me forever to figure out. I was determined to feature this little scallop, and that was kind of the start. But here's how it went. Okay. First, I started with this one, which of course is a disaster. It's too big. As I worked my way down, I thought, well, maybe I could incorporate the bunnies here at the toe. It was just a disaster, and there's too many. It's too busy, and the embroidery in white just doesn't stand out, and it wasn't good at all. This was actually in the garbage. I pulled it out to show you. And then the second one here, I used this as the cuff, and that didn't really work either because you kind of need like an edge. That's something that doesn't just kind of like disappear. So that was a disaster, and that was also in garbage. So then I went to these little ones. I thought that maybe I should just go smaller and use fewer fabrics, and so the bird scallop design would be more of a feature in a smaller design, but this is too small. And the birds are kind of going off the edge there, so I needed to make it a little bit wider. I also decided that I prefer the pink at the top and then the blue at the bottom. I like the way that looks. So that was good to figure out. I thought this had too much blue, not enough pink. Then finally, let's see. Then this one, so I used a contrast for the cuff, and then there's the birds. This is just a 1/4 of an inch wider than this small one. And then I discovered I hadn't come down far enough to do the wedges into this inner corner here. So I just did a straight across kind of a brick of the stripe, and I didn't like that either. So finally, I came up with this one, which is the right width, the right size, the right combination of colors and fabrics, except, and this happened with a lot of them, the mushroom print fabric, just, they're too widely spaced, and I did a few of them with a mushroom print, and none of the mushrooms even showed. So I switched to the poinsettia, the white floral here, and I've got it's 2 3/4 inch across pattern design, and all the combinations of the colors and the fabrics really look balanced to me. And of course, if you wanted to make this for a specific child, and you could go with more of their favorite colors, whatever they are, but this has enough colors, and I really like the way it turned out. Finally! Now I'm gonna make some more. Thank you for watching my tutorial. If you're enjoying my videos, please like, share, and subscribe.